My name is Marcia Robinson, and we are recording an oral history with Marty Petrone and with Diane Delisio as part of the Sweet MUMories Oral History Project. This project marks the 50th anniversary of the Miami University Middletown, Ohio campus. This interview is taking place on April 10, 2017 at the Gardner Harvey Library. Ms. Petrone and Ms. Delisio, do I have your consent to proceed with this interview?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. So could you tell us how you came to be connected with Miami University Middletown?
Do you want me to start?
Yes, I do. You're older.
I think it was 1978. I was on the Oxford campus, and there was a woman who was working here at the time, and there were some serious problems with her ability to get along with people here. And she was a little confused about her teaching schedule. She thought that TR meant that she only had to meet her classes on Thursdays, and so that's all she did. In fact, when I took the job, at one point I pulled a desk drawer out, and there were old course evaluations that she hid in there that were really, really bad. I don't know why she didn't destroy them, but anyway, they were in there, and we kind of laughed about that. But anyway, so there was a problem, and I was asked to go to the Middletown campus and kind of clean up the mess. It was supposed to be temporary, and I ended up staying like 32 years, so it wasn't all that temporary. So that's where I started. And I was, at the time, I was an instructor in the Department of Communication, which no longer exists.
We've had stories that communications classes have really transformed many of our Middletown students. Can you speak to some changes that you saw among some of your students?
I think the thing, it's hard at the time. I think a lot of the communication classes are very interactive. So particularly a public speaking class, you saw a lot of changes over the course of it. Where I saw the biggest changes were students that would come to the Middletown campus. They didn't know what they wanted to do. They were very confused. They just thought they had to go to college, and then they dropped out. And then maybe 3 or 4 years later, they'd come back, and they were different people at that point in time. So I don't know so much as it was the courses that did it as the fact that they needed to mature and have some focus. So in their minds, it was the class. I think probably it was more than that, a lot more than that.
Well, I don't want to get too far without bringing Diane into the story. Diane, can you tell us how you came to be associated with the Middletown campus?
Sure. Let me go back to when I was in college. I always thought I would be a teacher. But I went to graduate school and I did some student teaching. And I'm like, well, I'm not teaching high school. So I worked in industry for about 7 years and was looking for something different, and I saw a job opening up here. And this was actually in 1983, and I came and applied and I did not get the job that year. The next year, another position opened up, and the department chair of systems analysis was the department at the time, called me and said, we have another position, we want you to take it. And I said, oh, I got to come down and interview again. So I did, and I felt it was the right change for me at that point in my life. So I started here in August of 1984, and I'd been working in the IT industry. When I came here, it was a little bit of a step back because we had an industry, we had personal computers, desktops, it was the start of that era. And we came here and students had to key punch their cards, send them to Oxford, wait for hours or overnight of a turnaround to see that, oh my gosh, I made one mistake, I have to resubmit it. And that went on for a while. So eventually, after a few years, probably after Kathy Bishop Clark came here, she got hired in 1989.
You hired her.
I hired her, and I was her original supervisor, and Kathy contends that she had no boss. I asked her just a few weeks ago, does she have a boss now? Is the provost her boss? And she concedes yes, but I was never really her boss. But anyway, the students then, we had a lot of students at first because that was the big personal computer boom. And everybody thought, oh my God, I'm going to learn how to use computers. I'm going to get these great jobs. And then they found out what was involved because it was really crude. I mean, you had to have crude operating systems. Your programming languages were very cryptic. They weren't wordy. There were no graphical interfaces. It was all line by line entry. And so after a while, students decided, whoa, this is not for me. And after a few years, we actually lost quite a few students. We didn't have the big bubble of students that we had. And we had to figure out, what direction we want to go. And when I started, we were actually connected with the engineering technology group. So Dave Young was my original supervisor, and he retired after a couple of years. Then Rob Speckert became my supervisor. And Rob was here a long time, Hamilton and Middletown. He was awesome. And then I actually got tenure in '89, and shortly after that, they asked me to be the coordinator for the computing group, whatever it was called then, because engineering technology really had to focus on their own areas. So I did that.
When did it become CIT?
I'm getting there.
Okay. Hurry up. We don't have all day.
I'm sorry. So through the 90s, we experienced a lot of enrollment challenges, and we could only teach those courses that were offered in Oxford in the systems analysis department the first 2 years. We could not create any of our own courses, and we increasingly felt like we were not serving our students by just offering those courses, because those courses were going in a more theoretical direction, and we wanted our courses to be more applied to help students get jobs. And so the chair of systems analysis, and he was actually the dean at that time, Dave Haddad, worked with us, worked with the department, and we created computer and information technology became a department in 2001. And I became the first chair of that department. I was lucky enough to be chosen. And I was in that position until I went to Oxford.
So legend has it that you were a singularly different kind of person to be female in a male-dominated world, is what I've heard.
Excuse me?
That's what I've heard. I've heard that your department, as an industry, IT was a male-dominated field, and yet you come in and you're becoming chair of the department. What did you do to earn that kind of respect?
Well,
There weren't any men.
there were some men, but they weren't leaders. The men were really not leaders. None of the men really wanted to take a leadership position. And I was comfortable taking a leadership position. We had a lot of women in our department, though. It was unusual. Mm-hmm. We had one woman, Lori Werner, at the Hamilton campus. And then in '89, we hired Kathy Bishop Clark. Then we hired Liz Howard in the early '90s. Mm-hmm. And then Jill Cordigan at the Hamilton campus. So we had more women than we had men in our department. It was really kind of unusual. So it was not unusual that a woman took a leadership role.
Okay. Well, that fits with the story of faculty at the Middletown campus from the beginning, that there was always a diverse faculty here. Did you see that over your time working with the faculty here?
Well, at one point I was coordinator of English, Humanities, and Fine Arts, and it was an incredibly diverse population. I mean, it was amazing. I think I had over 60 faculty members in 19 different departments, and the makeup of that group was across the board probably one of the most diverse. So yeah, it definitely was.
I think it was diverse also in experience.
Yeah, I agree.
You did not have all traditional academics. You had people that had some work experience, some different world experience, and it made for not only a diverse faculty, but one that you could really learn from. I mean, the thing that I want people to remember are the times that we as faculty members would meet with each other and talk about our students and talk about teaching, and we did that regularly all the time.
It was not in a formal way. It was like we would, if we had an issue, we would maybe go to the faculty lounge over lunch and say, this is happening, I'm not sure how I want to approach it, what do you think? And we had the input from people from all different departments. So I think one of the I don't know what you'd call it, like one of the benefits of being in a regional campus is the fact that you have people in different departments, in offices across from you. You learn from each other and you can collaborate together. And it's interesting that, in the work I'm doing now, one of the things that's the big push is to have interdisciplinary courses dealing with big issues in the world like sustainability and immigration, that kind of thing. And of the places at Miami where that could happen most readily, it's the regional campus, because people are talking to each other and they're engaging across those divisions.
So tell me some more about these relationships among the faculty. Was it just focused on the students?
Oh, no.
No, we had friendships.
We made lifelong friends.
Yeah, lifelong friends, almost like a surrogate family, I think. When Diane started, Diane is from Youngstown, Ohio. I'm from Cleveland. And we both have an Italian heritage. She a little bit more than me, but not much. And
Twice?
No, I had my ancestry deal.
Oh, that's right, I forgot.
I'm 65%.
Okay, sorry.
Anyway, so, and we just immediately hit it off and became friends. We had a lot in common. We knew that part of the country. There were a lot of things that we didn't have to explain to each other. And I think the other thing, at least I was thinking about this, one of the things, I came from a working class background, from a very diverse part of Cleveland. So when I first was a student on the Oxford campus as an undergraduate, I thought I had no idea where I was and I couldn't stand it. It was so different from anything I'd experienced before. I mean, I think it was a form of culture shock. When I came here, it felt comfortable because it was what I understood. It reminded me, there was ethnicity, there was diversity, there were people who, maybe they weren't all the best students in the world, but
they worked hard.
They worked hard. For the most part, they worked hard. They were trying. They didn't have everything kind of handed to them. And I just liked the atmosphere a lot.
So you mentioned being from Northeast Ohio. That's the Rust Belt now, but this is in steel town also. What does education mean in a steel town?
Well, what I think it means is that parents have worked in steel industries and difficult jobs and factories, and they want more for their children than that. And that's why this campus is here in the first place. And so many people sent their children here so they can get an education, get a better job, make a better salary than they did. And that was right, where we came from. So that was familiar to us. But as Marty had said, students often struggled. They came just because their parents wanted them to come at first. But there were so many that I would see come back a couple of years later. Well, one of my best students, I remember, he did that. He left, and I thought, oh God, this is so awful that he left. 2 years later, he was back. He worked in the factory, worked in industry. It was not for him. He realized what he was giving up, and he was back. And he finished what he could here. He went to Oxford, got a bachelor's degree, got great jobs, and I was in touch with him for many years after he left here. But it just changed his life. Once he was ready for it, you have to be ready for it.
But there's also another thing too. A lot of them had challenges, even though their parents pushed them to go to college. Then they had challenges with their parents as they learned things, and their values were different from their parents. Yeah. They would confront things at home that were very uncomfortable. Their parent, you're a college kid now and you think you know everything, and it was very hurtful to them. And so there was a lot of counseling, I think, sometimes that at least I had to do. I taught communication, so people were always in my office, and I was constantly trying to talk them through how to approach their parents, and and to understand where their parents were coming from. And it wasn't that their parents weren't proud of them, but they were a little bit threatened by them, and they were afraid they were losing them. So there were a lot of challenges that way. And we also had, I mean, I'm going to tell you a story that maybe I shouldn't, but we had instances where women would come back to college. We even had a case where a man came to the campus with a gun and pulled it on Gene Bennett in his office because his wife changed. And he didn't, she wasn't coming home and making dinner the way
after she got an education.
After she got an education. And he came in with a gun and had it out and said, "You've changed my wife and I can't." So, there were other things behind the scenes going on too.
Yeah.
Those questions still happen on campus?
Oh, sure.
How expensive education can be. And it's not just about the money. It's about the relationships. What would you offer to students in return, or what words of wisdom would you offer to a student on how to deal with that expensive cost of education?
That's a tough one.
Yeah, I think
how to explain the cost of education, because I've always felt it was worth it. Just intrinsically, I've always felt it was worth it. So it's hard for me to articulate. I mean, my parents, I don't remember them ever thinking otherwise than I would go to college, and I wanted to go to college. I wanted to learn. I wanted to figure out what I wanted to do in life, and I thought that was worth it. Now, you can go to a college that you're so much in debt that it's not worth it, but that's not this place. And that's why, to me, this place is even more worth it.
There's another side to that, though. I'm actually counseling a student who is a Hamilton student. It's a long story how he ends up with me in Oxford, but he basically wants to study abroad, but his family doesn't want him to have any debt because they've heard about kids having $250,000 to try to overcome when they graduate. And now he's trying to work really hard so that he can't have any debt, and yet he wants to study abroad, but he doesn't think he can. And, so it's really hard. I mean, there has to be a middle ground. The big thing is, I don't think students should be coming to college without having time to think about what it is they want. And so the regional campuses are, at least an alternative to maybe take a class or two and then get a sense of whether that's the direction they want to go in, and it's much less expensive. But, the expense is an issue, and I don't think there's any solution to that.
That is the answer, yeah.
Many of our students here are first-generation students, but some are also place-bound from external responsibilities. Can you speak to what some of those responsibilities might be that are different at the regional campuses rather than at the Oxford campus?
Oh, sure.
Sure. They have to take care of their families, both their children and their parents, and so they're place-bound. And I can remember I guess I would call them the battles with the Oxford campus. Long ago we wanted to offer bachelor's degree programs here because the bachelor's degree programs in Oxford, students could relocate and go there, but they couldn't meet the demands of the time of the day, or they're going to work on projects with other students, and those students are traditional age students. Let's get together at 11 o'clock, over in Armstrong Student Center. They couldn't do that because they have their children and their parents and their husbands and their wives. And so the place-bound nature of these students, they're rooted here. And they want to stay here, and they want to be able to get a good quality education, which Miami offers here. They don't want to have to go to Sinclair or drive to Oxford. They want to be able to do it here, be able to run home if they have to, and that kind of thing.
Well, I would say Oxford is not a particularly welcoming place for regional campus students in many ways. I mean, it's interesting because there's going to be an inclusion symposium in Oxford on October 13th, and I'm on that planning committee. And one of the things we're going to do is have a focus group with regional campus students to get their take on it. But just from my own experience, students who transfer, who are like traditional age and they move there, they're at a somewhat social disadvantage because they have to move into an apartment. They haven't had that residence hall experience. They haven't made those friends. Most of them can't afford nor are interested in fraternities and sororities. So how do they make friendships if they're actually transferring physically there? Okay, so there's that. But then as Diane said, there is no mentality at all about the fact that there are students commuting to that campus. I mean, they may have a commuter lounge, but there's nothing surrounding the fact that these people are having to drive at least probably a half an hour from Hamilton, if not 45 minutes, find a parking place, get the bus to get to the campus, take the class, then go home after their classes. Their classes may not be scheduled in a way that makes it convenient for them. And then, as she said, they have these group projects where the Oxford students can, walk down the street to the library, where someone else has to make another trip back. So it's not at all receptive to that. And I think until this recent regional resurrection of, or I don't know if it's a resurrection, because there used to be bachelor's degrees offered on the regionals, but they were, like, I think the education and those kinds of things. And
yeah, that was done under the radar.
And under the radar, you could do
and
it.
Sociology.
But now I think it's good for the students here that they can get their degrees here, particularly the BIS degree. I think that's a fabulous degree.
What do you love about the BIS degree?
Well, first of all, it's innovative. Second of all, these students are empowered to come up with their own course of study. And I know when they initially the ones that I had who were BIS students, it was interesting when they first started how they would, because I would get them in communication classes. They're like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah,
and then by the second class, they're like, this is what I'm doing, and here's what I'm studying, and I can't wait to do this project, and I'm going to do this. And it was just so exciting to see them empowered and also just so excited and passionate about what they were studying. And of course, it's interdisciplinary, and that's cutting edge now. And I don't know, I just think it's a wonderful degree for these students.
I was on the committee that made that. Yeah.
I think I was too. I can hardly remember.
No, you weren't.
I was on the Center for Teaching. I was one of the ones that helped get that started. Center for Teaching. Yeah.
Can you tell us about the early days?
I can barely remember, honestly. That's when I was the coordinator of English, Humanities, and Fine Arts, and I had so many fires I was putting out on a daily basis. I think the funniest thing about administration was when I took that job, I'd have a list of 10 things I would do, like at first, and I'd go into work, and I'd still have those 10 things, and I did at least 10 things during the day, and then I had 10 more for the next day, and I was like, there's something wrong with this picture.
That's normal.
And so there were constant things to deal with. But I remember it was, Ellen Marie Walreb,
Jeff
Summers, me. I was the coordinator kind of behind it. And then that's it. I remember Ellen Marie. Wasn't Mike Heber too? I can't remember.
Could have been, yeah.
And, it was just an idea, and we just got it moving. And I think it's an excellent entity on this campus. They do some really good things.
It is. I'd like to talk about a couple of events. So many people talk about the Finkelman auditorium and events that they went to, speakers they remember, performances. Could be Aerosmith. I mean, do you have any stories about that?
No.
That was too early for me, but I do remember when I first came, they said that when the Finkelman first opened, one of the first, if not the first concert, was Aerosmith. And the place was trashed. And, seats were torn, and the rumor was that someone rode in on a motorcycle or out on a motorcycle. I don't know, but it was an interesting story, and I don't know if it's true, but that was the folklore that I was told. The only other I remember, was it James Brady's wife coming?
From the protest, yeah.
And there was a protest, and it was
scary.
It was awful. I remember it because she was trying to get gun legislation passed, and she came to speak, and there were people already outside. And then when they had the first several rows, and when she started to speak, they stood up and turned their back to her. And she ultimately left the stage. She couldn't complete,
It's
but
very hostile.
and a man had a heart attack.
Oh, yeah.
Remember?
Yeah.
So I mean, I remember that. I mean, I don't remember.
I don't remember a whole lot about
I
it.
don't-
I mean,
I
I
really
went to
don't.
other ones, but I just don't remember.
I did too. That I mean, like the Chinese circus. I remembered that, but I mean, I don't know. All I remember when I went to that one was that's the one where they do the spinning. You know,
Plates?
they put the plates and they spin, and I was like, that's my life. I could do that. I could work for the Chinese circus.
Juggle too, probably.
Before we started, you mentioned a couple of colleagues, Miriam Cottrell and Liz Howard. What would you like to enter into the record about them?
Well, Mary Cottrell, still a very dear friend of ours, was I guess you would call her the
epitome of
the
class.
executive. Well, I was giving her a title. The executive assistant to the executive director, the administrative assistant to the executive director. And she always exuded a total calm. She was in command. She gave me one of my greatest administrative tools. She would send her an email and say, "This is a gentle reminder," and you knew darn well it wasn't gentle. You had missed a deadline or something.
I never got any.
I apparently did, but I use it now to send gentle reminders. And she just did not let anything really get to her. And things could, because my God, you're working for the executive director, and that's really that's now the dean's position. Same thing. That was what it was called. And she just handled it all, and she was great. When she was gone, wow. It was a big deal to replace her because she just did so much. I also like to talk about, I'll talk about Liz in a minute, Marion Piles, who taught English. Marion Piles was, I don't know, well, she passed away several years ago, and I just still miss her.
Me too.
She just kind of took me under her wing, because when I came here, I knew no one. I did not know what I was doing. I was scared out of my mind the first semester. And, we just hit it off, and we would always just sit in the faculty line and talk about things. And then I was like integrated into her family. Her husband would, talk about me being the sister to the kids, to all the boys and stuff. And she taught English, and she was, I don't know, how would you describe? She was just so focused. She just loved teaching English. She loved the students. She loved to help them with their writing. She was just a wonderful teacher and a wonderful person.
She was, definitely.
Yeah.
She was the coordinator before I was, and so she was technically my boss at some point. But I mean, when we talk about these relationships, it's not like that here. I mean, it may be now, but when we were here, it was not like that. I mean,
You were colleagues.
You were colleagues, and you were friends, and you always knew that if there was something going on in your life and you needed help, that they were there for you. And it was, it really was unique, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like that everywhere. So
No.
I was going to say, Marion Cottrell also helped people out. She very subtly would let people know things when they were maybe being told things that weren't exactly true. And she would say, well, maybe you'd want to check this or whatever. And she was very subtle. She never was indiscreet, but she also knew what was fair and wasn't fair, and would intercede very gently to make sure things were right.
Liz Howard?
Oh, Lizzie.
So, did we talk about Liz yet?
No.
No. We did before we started.
I'm curious. Thank you. I'd like to know about her.
Liz, as I said, she started working here because she had worked in industry, felt like it wasn't for her, went to graduate school, got a master's, and tried to get a PhD, but really disliked the program where she went and was just looking around, what am I going to do? What kind of job am I going to get? And she contacted the Systems Analysis Department in Oxford because that's where she got her master's. And they said, well, we don't have any positions, but they do have a position at the regional campuses. Here, contact Diane Delisio. So I met with her, and in those days it was really pretty informal.
It was.
You met with someone, they had the credentials, you needed to fill this position because my recollection is we had searched and really didn't find anybody acceptable, and here is Liz, and I'm like, okay, good, we'll hire you. So we hired her, and she had no teaching experience, but she was a natural. She was just a wonderful, wonderful teacher, and she loved it. She really found her calling. She connected with the students. She did innovative things in the classroom.
She also won at just about every teaching award there was.
Yeah.
I mean, in fact, there's kind of a funny story.
Oh.
She was in Oxford accepting one of the awards, and I can't remember if that was.
It was, I know which one it was. It was the School of Engineering and Applied Science at the time, Outstanding Teacher Award. And it was at Markham Center. I can visualize it right now.
And she was having trouble with her legs. Tell me if I'm wrong on
No.
this. And as she was walking up to get the award,
she's standing up there.
Okay.
As they're talking about her, she's standing like against the wall, and she's slowly sinking down because her legs are going numb for some reason. She sank right to the floor. And her husband, he's a big guy, we're like, Dave, you gotta go help her. But he didn't want to interrupt because I'm not sure the speaker knew that she was sinking down to the floor. Remember?
And then the provost and I guess the dean.
The dean, yeah.
They were freaking out because they didn't know what had happened, and
Right.
she was cool about it. I mean, she got back up and said, "Sorry, I didn't mean to scare." And she said, and then she found out she had to say something.
Yeah, right. That's right.
And she said, "Well, I don't know what to do that could top what I just did." So
Yeah,
that tells you what
she's always very funny. Yeah.
And I have a history with her because she actually took over my office, which turned out to be across from the office that I assumed. And when she first started, she was not so sure about, she was used to writing these really succinct reports. And in academia, you need to really embellish things. And she'd bring things over to me and I'd say, that's not going to cut it. So I remember the first thing I said to her was, write it like you're writing a letter to me. And after that, I mean, she took off and she could do everything herself. But over the course of time, she got curious about communication and the intercultural communication that I taught. And I was much less curious about computers. But anyway, over the course of time, she would talk to me about it. And at one point, she decided she wanted to create a course in the CIT department called Global and Strategic Issues in IT, or Strategic and Global Issues in IT. And together we coordinated it so that it would have a component where students in IT don't normally do communication. And we wanted to, a lot of the research shows that although their students are graduating, not just in CIT, but in other fields, technically efficient and able to do what they're doing, but they're not very good with getting along with people or communicating in groups and that kind of thing. So we created this course and we co-taught it, and it's considered a cutting-edge course across a lot of different places. In fact, I just got an email from someone who wants to copy it, and I forwarded it to Donna Evans, who's now teaching the course.
Yeah, it's still being taught.
Yeah. But it was partially me and almost all her. So.
Yeah, she was awesome. You know, I would really be remiss if I didn't give a shout out that I met my husband here.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, he would be really hurt if I didn't mention that.
And I met her husband here too.
He was a returning older student. He was not in my class. We got to get that on the record right now. He always said, "Oh my God, I would never take a class from you," because he thinks that would be too hard, which that could be. But he was, as I said, a returning student. He worked in the mailroom when we had a mailroom. I don't know if we still have a mailroom. Okay. Olamide Pearson, have you heard about her? She just passed away recently.
Yeah, she's fantastic.
She ran the mailroom, and she helped so many students, returning students.
Yeah,
she was like an informal advisor that just told them the ins and outs, though, of how to get through, because a lot of returning students, they didn't have a clue how to navigate the culture of the university, and Olamide really, really helped them out. And my husband worked with her for a couple of years before he got his degree and went on to do social work.
And we all enjoyed watching this budding romance
Oh,
evolve.
stop, you did not.
Oh, we did. It was really fun to watch. Uh-huh. I remember her saying, Ronnie and I are seeing each other, and I was like, yeah, really? Like, we didn't notice. Like, it's so obvious.
Oh, stop.
He's hanging around your office constantly.
Well, he was, yeah.
From the beginning, there was a system or a tradition of creating a social life among the faculty. There were holiday dinners, progressive dinners. Did any of that continue during your time period?
Oh, gosh, yes.
Can you tell us about that tradition?
Okay, remember Marion and Carl's story?
Go ahead. And then I'll talk about the Thanksgiving dinner.
Well, first I want to mention, we had Christmas parties every year that were off campus. So sometimes they would be, like they were downtown Middletown one time at a country club. But they were often, when Mike Governani was the executive director, at his house. They were fun.
I know.
I
was just thinking about some of it. It was just making me laugh.
They were just really fun to have those parties. Real early on when I was here, we went to a winery. I'm pretty sure it was a winery.
I remember that.
Yeah. I think Gene Bennett was still the executive director. And he puts on the invitation casual dress. And so Marion Pyle's husband comes in a casual dress to this event. Now that was a strong woman that would let her husband do that, because I don't think I would have let my husband do that. He just thought it was the funniest thing in the world.
Not a kilt, it was a dress.
No, it was a dress. It was a shift. It was a regular dress.
He basically came in drag.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So he was really proud of that. He would continue to talk about that for years.
I had an embarrassing experience at that. We were seated with this couple, and my husband and I had just gone to some event or whatever, I can't remember, at someone's house, and they had a very unusual lamp that had like oil that would come down, okay, and then it had this like gilded person inside it or whatever. It was a very kind of elegant house.
The tacky lamp?
Yeah, pretty much. Anyway, so we were seated there, and he starts going on. We were seated with some people from a different department than I normally know, and he starts going on and on about how tacky this lamp is, and I'm noticing, as he's describing it, these other people, and I'm like kicking him under the table because it's obvious they have one.
No way.
It was so embarrassing. So I remember that. You remember those kinds of things. Well, I was going to talk about the Thanksgiving. There's a tradition of a Thanksgiving dinner on this campus. And the way it started was there was a man who taught was he in Jim Strupp in BTE?
BTE, yeah.
Okay, he taught in BTE, and he had heart disease.
Which is now Commerce, anyway.
Oh, it's Commerce
Yeah.
now. Okay. And he was a real lovable man, and he was
He's a
really
real kind soul.
real kind soul, and we saw him, getting sick and whatever. But anyway, right before Thanksgiving, he passed away, and as a tribute to him, we decided that we were going to have like a tree planting for him, and then we were going to have a Thanksgiving dinner, and so we invited his wife and family. And I arranged for this tree planting thing. And then what I did was, I was like, we can't cook Thanksgiving dinner here. So I went to Marsh's, and there's these lovely women that work at Marsh's, or at least then. And I said, here's what we want to do. And Marsh's used to have these Thanksgiving dinners you could buy as a package. And I said, would you be able to make these for this amount of people? And they said, sure. So we, everybody helped. I mean, I remember like Dave Ballard was cutting the turkey, and other people were getting everything set up. And we had it was like 115 or 16 in Johnston Hall. And everybody came. And it was just a really nice experience. And after that, there was so much positive feedback that they decided to continue it. And then I believe the administrators decided to take it over. And I think it continues today, doesn't it? Yeah.
Oh, good. I'm glad it continues.
Yeah. At that time, we had people bringing desserts. And I think now you're not allowed to do that. I don't know what the circumstances are, but it was nice to have that.
What made you stay at MUM?
Well, tenure is a big deal.
Okay.
But I stayed because it was always interesting. There was always something new. You were always learning. The job never stayed the same.
Yeah,
the students
I agree.
never stayed the same. You always had new challenges. New faculty would come on. You'd be mentoring new faculty. It was, and our jobs, we're here a lot, but it's not like you're stuck here 8 to 5, like I am now in my job in Oxford. But if you have to leave, and rearrange something, you could leave and rearrange something. If you had to go to doctors, it was that aspect, and also the creative aspect. So your class isn't working out quite right. What can I do to improve it? What creative thing can I do in my class to connect with my students? Who can I talk to on campus that can help me figure out, why this isn't working, what might work better? And to be able to be creative and to really, construct something. You have the bare bones of a course. You know what the basic topics are, but how are you going to deliver that? You get to decide that. So that's what kept me here.
Well, I think similar reasons kept me here, but I also had children, and the flexibility of being able to be in their lives and also, have a career. I think I see a difference. Like, for example, I have a daughter who has 2 daughters, and her job is 8 to 5, maybe longer, year round. You get a certain number of days of vacation, and just having the flexibility to be with my children, that was probably the primary reason. The second reason was learning. And although I worked here, I also had a number of different roles in the Oxford campus. And I was always happiest when I had something both places. It balanced me out because I need that kind of variety and challenge in my life in order to feel comfortable and, learning and stuff. So same as her. Whatever she says, I say.
Oh, yeah, always.
You can drop that out.
No, leave it in. I also want to say that you just reminded me that not only did we have relationships with each other, we had relationships with their children. I don't have children, but her children I've known since they were, Lauren had to be 8,
Yeah.
8 or 9, and seen them grow up, and I'm pretty close to them. Jeff Summers, who left here and went to Westchester University and just came back for to give a talk a couple of weeks ago. I remember his sons, we were talking about this when he was here. His sons would come when they would have a day off school or they'd be sick. And they'd have sleeping bags in his offices, and they would just stay there and be quiet. But you'd see them walking around, and for some reason we interacted, and now they're successful. Ben's a doctor. Sam's a professor, and they still remembered me, and that was just kind of nice that they would do that. And
well, my older daughter had mono when she was 12, and Diane lived in Middletown at the time. I don't know if you remember this, and I said, I need to do something with her. She said, well, bring her over, and while you're teaching the class, she can stay on the couch and watch TV. And so she was at her house. We had to disinfect afterwards. No, I'm just kidding. And, so it was that kind of relationship. And but it's, it's beyond it. There's a circle of friends that are all like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's,
right.
There's a whole group of us, and some have passed away, but, there's just deep feelings that are there for the colleagues. And I think, in fact, that's one of the reasons why we stayed.
Yes, yeah. I got to mention the faculty lounge in Johnston Hall. That was my lifeline when I first came here, because I did not know what I was doing. I really did not. And
it showed, too.
Oh, stop it. And you can go in the faculty lounge and, talk to someone and just, you would just make connections, feel better. But it's not like that anymore. I don't think faculty do that as much. I just think I don't know if we had more free time or what it was.
Well, there was a requirement when I was here that you had to have X number of office hours,
right.
And you had to be on campus a certain number of days. That apparently no longer exists.
No.
I mean, there are times when I come to the campus, and if I go upstairs to Johnston Hall, there isn't a soul there.
Every door is closed.
Every door is closed. There isn't anyone there, and I realize that some of that may have to do with so many courses that are being offered online, and
just different demands.
And things have changed.
Yeah.
But there's something lost there.
Yes.
Because you don't have. It's interesting. I felt like the lounge in Johnston Hall was one of the most intellectual places I've been.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I gotta stop. One more thing about the lounge. When we first started, there was still smoking on campus. It was the smokiest place you can imagine.
Absolutely.
At least three: Phil, David, and Marion. Who else? Did anybody else smoke?
I think
it was so smoky.
I think Donna Clarence smoked.
Oh yeah, Donna Clarence. Yeah, so smoky.
So we have about 2 minutes left. Any thoughts that you want to make sure that a future faculty member looking at this video picks up, that you say, this is what you have to continue for this to still be MUM?
You have to continue the connections with the students and the connections with each other. Don't take that for granted. I work in Oxford in a place where I don't connect with that many people throughout the day, and I really miss it. It's really a deficit in my professional life.
I don't know. I think they are continuing it. I still stay in touch, and I think it's part of the culture here. I would find it really unlikely that it wouldn't continue. There seems to be, there's always going to be some people that aren't engaged, but there seems to be a core of people here that are still doing the same thing. They really care about their students. They really want to relate to each other. I get emails all the time because I'm on the listserv of really creative things that they're doing. So I'd say just keep doing what you're doing.